It's Prediction Thursday here at Lions Talk Live. We're going to break down Green Bay versus Detroit in Lambeau Field on Sunday Night Football. What are we going to have to do if we're the Lions to get a win? What do we expect to see out of Green Bay that stagnated the Detroit Lions offense at Ford Field just about 2 months ago? We're going to dial into those factors, review the playoff scenarios, which I'm sure you all know, but just in case somebody hasn't, we'll get into all those factors and maybe just a little bit more in today's Prediction Thursday version of Lions Talk Live. Well, greetings and salutations to everybody out there in YouTube land. I am your host once again, Dan Thornton, and like I said in the intro, we're going to break down Sunday night's big matchup between Detroit and Green Bay in Lambeau Field. I'm going to try to give you my identifications of some of the factors we can expect from both teams using over 30 years of coaching to analyze film, what happened in the first game, and what's probable for adjustments in this game. We're going to go into all of that and see what it all means. Again, if, like I said in the intro, though, talking about the Detroit Lions playoff scenario, they're going to be watching the 4:30 game between the Seattle Seahawks and Los Angeles Rams. If the Rams can pull off the upset, then Detroit, if they win in Green Bay, yes, will be in the playoffs. If the Rams cannot win, that means Detroit's draft pick with the Rams actually moves up in value, and the Lions are left to be potential spoilers of the Packers' hopes to be in the playoffs. Before we get into the breakdown, if you haven't yet subscribed to Lions Talk Live, please consider doing so. It takes about a second and a half to hit the subscription button, maybe leave a thumbs up, and if you want, maybe leave it a comment in the section below. Now, let's get into today's breakdown. So, let's start off with what the Detroit Lions did to be so effective against Green Bay in the first matchup this year at Ford Field. It's something you probably wouldn't expect to see in film, and what I'm about to say shocked me when I went back and reviewed it. I may have noticed it in the game, but, you know, hey, to be fair, I've watched a few games since then and analyzed some films. So what I'm going to say is this. The Lions played basically a run defense formation. And who would ever guess that would be possible against somebody like Aaron Rodgers? So what do I mean if you by saying they played a run defensive formation? They played single high safety with 3 men over the guards and the center on defense. They were going to force Green Bay, if they were going to run, it couldn't be up the middle, and we're going to have to force them out wide. To be fair to Green Bay, they did run the ball, if you look at it statistically well, but all their runs came on either Aaron Rodgers' third down scrambles or out wide plays. The Lions clearly said, you know, Aaron Rodgers' thumb is going to inhibit some of his throw abilities, some of his deep shots that, you know, just a couple years ago, you would expect, hey, Aaron Rodgers would kill you if you did something like this. But Aaron Rodgers then did have a busted up thumb, and you are starting to see more of this in film with other teams. So while Aaron Rodgers' thumb has healed, it's clear teams are saying, we're going to force Aaron Rodgers to beat us. And who would have ever guessed that? This guy's been, you know, league MVP a ton of times. He's been awesome for seemingly over a decade, and to be fair, over a decade. So the fact that teams have started doing this, and it began with the Detroit Lions, you know, it just shows that Father Time comes for us all. Now, is that a reflection that other teams don't have belief in Dobbs and Watson? Let's also be fair that in the Week 9 matchup between these two teams, those two younger receivers for Green Bay hadn't yet really gelled and developed with Rodgers. Have they done so since that time? Yes, they have. They've gotten much better. So Detroit's ability to run this same defense or something very, very similar is going to be a little bit less likely just because these two have gotten better, and Rodgers' throwing hand / his thumb has improved exponentially. But I wanted to go back and watch the last few games of the Packers and see if teams were, like I said, continuing to do this. And for the most part, they have. While you've seen some production out of the younger receivers for Green Bay, it's been inconsistent. And even though Green Bay has won a number of these games, I would say this, it's more because of the Green Bay defense than the offense. The Lions at that time had injury woes, like we just noted, throughout the receiving core, but also on their offensive line. You had a number of guys that were out and had to see backups and even backups to the backups get major minutes against Green Bay. So what does this mean? Green Bay came out, and again, like we mentioned with Detroit played single high safety, and they were dropping 8, sometimes 9 guys in the box and saying, we're not going to let you throw the ball. I will say this. We talked about in Lions Talk Live ad nauseum throughout this season that the Detroit Lions coaching staff was young in nature, and they didn't know what they didn't know. A lot of times they had to develop answers for problems they didn't yet know how to counter. And this Green Bay game was a prime example of that. Ben Johnson didn't yet know how to defeat some of these man-to-man principles that began with New England, overloading, playing man-to-man across the board, and saying, no way are we going to let you run the ball. To Detroit's credit, though, Ben Johnson has gotten better. He has gotten more experience, and they have developed. If you go back and watch that first game against Green Bay, Detroit, to their discredit, continue to try to run the ball against 8- and 9-man fronts. And, as you probably guessed, they weren't horribly successful in that matchup. So let's talk about the Lions and what they face now against Green Bay's defense. Like I said in the intro, both teams played very similar defense. In fact, the Packers overloaded the box the vast majority throughout the game. They said, if you're going to beat us, it's not going to be the run game. It's going to have to be with Jared Goff. Now, before we dive in and say, hey, nobody had respect for Goff, let's review the receivers and tight end position at that time. T.J. Hockenson had just left, and a number of Detroit's receivers were vastly beat up and not available. Some of them were on IR. So from the Packers' perspective, they said, hey, you just got rid of your best tight end. The vast majority of your receivers that can play aren't healthy, or they're just not very good receivers. You were talking about Tom Kennedy and a bunch of other guys that had to be brought up because people like DJ Chark and Josh Reynolds with Amon-Ra St. Brown were either unavailable totally or very beat up and limited in what they could do. Let's assume the worst for Detroit and that Seattle does win their game and Detroit walks into this game with, like I said just a moment ago, nothing to lose. I think you're going to see them just go, excuse the term, balls to the wall on both sides of the ball. They're probably going to blitz heavy, try to, get to Rodgers early and often and rattle him. And that's something that has been more and more successful. Let's not forget the first game that we played Green Bay this year. James Houston was nowhere to be seen. And he is now in his prime while you're starting to see the Detroit Lions coaching staff play him on first and second down more, something that has progressed over the season. Aiden Hutchinson, along with a cast of other people, like, say, Romeo Okwara, who was also in the first game, have really developed a bond and ability to flex around on the defensive line and outside wide to get to quarterbacks. And this has caused some problems for a number of teams. So my score prediction is going to be this. Call me a slappy, a Lions fan, or whatever you want, but I'm going to say Lions 33, the Pack 27. I do believe it's going to be a good game. I'm not going to say whether or not I think Seattle's going to win or lose because I haven't studied them, but I will say this. I think you're going to see a ton of play action, and I think the Packers are going to have to respect that. Let's be honest. That's one of Goff's strengths. But this should be a little bit different game for not only the Lions, but the Packers. Keeping the focus on the Lions, the receiving core is as healthy as it's been at any point in this season since perhaps the first game of the year. The offensive line is as good as it's going to be at this point, and same with the running backs. So from that standpoint, Detroit enters this matchup perfect. They're healthy, everybody's out there, everybody's in tune, and they're ready to go. The same could, for the most part, be said with Green Bay. What I believe this will mean is neither team is going to have a ton of success playing a lot of 8-man fronts. With that being said, we are probably all aware it's going to be a night game in Lambeau in early January. The weather temperatures are anticipated to be in the high teens by kickoff, so it's going to be cold. But I'm going to say this, both teams are going to play with basically nothing to lose. If you don't win this game, your season is over. Detroit, whether they're playing for the playoffs or the spoilers role, I'll say this, if they're playing a spoiler role, really, what do you have to lose? You can just run out there and play every trick play or whatever type of play you want, because if you don't win, who cares? It's not going to end your season. That could be an advantage, actually, to Detroit. But I'm anticipating this. The score is going to be a little bit higher than most of us anticipate. The Packers' D is going to come down to this. Can they maintain run gap integrity, shut down the run, so the play action is less prominent? That's, I think, where the problem lies. If Detroit can get a number of 2nd and, say, 6 or 5 yards to go, then I think Detroit has Green Bay at their mercy. Green Bay's secondary, I think, is very, very good. Same with the linebacking core. I do not think their defensive line is overly great. And that lies the problem. Because their line isn't the greatest, I think they're going to have to commit more linebackers and a safety out there to just stop the Detroit Lions run game like they did in the first game. But if they can't stop it while getting to the quarterback, then the play action, which has been Detroit and Goff's friend throughout the season, is probably going to look to do fairly well this year. That's going to put their secondary in a world of hurt, I believe, and it could make the difference between the win and the loss. I guess we'll have to see what shakes out come Sunday night. All right, well, I'll wrap up this video with that. You know what I thought? I broke down the defensive for both teams. I do think Aaron Rodgers, while he's still a very, very good quarterback, is starting to show some signs of either injury or age, or maybe it's the lack of the trust he has in his offensive line and his receiving core. Detroit's secondary is not great, and you've heard me talk about that before, so this will be a real test for them. I do expect Rodgers to have to take more deeper shots against this team because that pass rush is going to be coming for him, and it's going to be available. I think if they try to stay to short crossers, can they have some success? Sure. But I think Rodgers' temptation is going to be, and his past history has shown, he's going to throw a lot of deep outs to the sidelines and deep posts. I don't think we'll see it a whole lot over the middle just because Kirby Joseph is actually strong at that. He's not yet the young rookie, great at covering the sidelines and helping out and assist. We'll see what happens, but I thank you all for tuning in today. If you haven't yet subscribed, please consider doing so. Leave a thumbs up and our interactive comment in the section down below. Take care, enjoy your days, and we'll see you tomorrow on another Lions Talk Live.